Well, hey guys, welcome to week 6 of our Greater Life Group series. My name is Riley, and I'm so humbled and honored to be able to do this life group video for you. I know in my group these discussions have been great, and I'm just hoping and praying that tonight or this afternoon, whenever you're meeting, is the same for you. And week 6, we're talking about the greatest among us, and how we're going to start. Just pause this video real quick and read Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. I love this little passage of scripture because he's pretty clear about what he says. The greatest among us is the child. The greatest among us is the person who is childlike. And there's a big difference between being childish and childlike. See, someone who is childish is someone who acts a lot younger than their actual age. Like my sister growing up, she would always say, act your age, not your shoe size. And that's so good in life. And I think a lot of times we act childish and we respond in childish ways, and we become selfish and think the world revolves around us. But that's not how we're supposed to live. We're supposed to live childlike. And childlikeness is different. If you look up childlike in the dictionary, it simply says becoming like a child. And that's a great definition, right? It gives us so much to go off of. But what does childlikeness, what does that look like? It looks like being creative, being imaginative, being humble, being innocent, trusting. Like that's what being childlike is all about. And in Matthew 18, verse 3, Jesus says, "Assuredly, I say to you, unless you change and become like little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." And Jesus is saying here that we must change and become like a child. Because at our core, at our heart, we want to make the world about us. But when we become childlike, we make our life and the world about Jesus and about our Father and our parents, like children do. And childlike faith, it's simple, it's pure, it's innocent, it's trusting, it's believing the Lord in a way that a child believes their parents. And every single day, I think we need to ask the question: is our faith childish? Or is our faith childlike? And hopefully, day after day, you continue to become more childlike in your faith and not childish as we strive to grow every single day. And another characteristic of a child that I love, I think is so cool, is humility. And we must humble ourselves like a child. And Matthew 18, verse 4 says, "Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." And it's interesting that Jesus uses a child in this situation and in this example, because at this time, in their context, children were seen to have little to no value because they couldn't contribute to society or make money or do things like adults could. So it got the disciples thinking so much about what their faith should look like, because a child is completely dependent upon their parent. And that's ultimately where we should strive to be, and that's where we should go in our faith. We should get to a point where we're completely dependent on the Lord to survive each day. And this is why the key verse for this whole series, John 3:30, is so great, because it says, "He must become greater and I must become less." So what that is really saying is, God must become greater. And the only way that's going to happen is if I humble myself. And if I look at myself as a child, not being able to do things on my own, but only being able to do things through the strength that God gives me. And just this week, as I was preparing this message and this sermon, it was a humbling moment for me, because I remember growing up, when I was a little kid, like kindergarten and first grade, people would ask me, "Riley, like, what do you want to be when you get older?" And I would say, I want to be like my dad. I want to be a pastor. Because growing up, my heroes in life were my parents, my mom and my dad. And because of that, I would tell people I wanted to be a pastor. And this week, as I was preparing this message and being able to preach on a Sunday morning to my church, I became almost prideful. And I had a sense of accomplishment, thinking that, like, I got here. I got to do this. But God this week really began to humble my heart and remind me that it's not about me, but it's about him. And it was a great reminder for me to humble myself before the Lord. And Matthew 23:12 says, "For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." And I love this verse because it lays out kind of two choices for us in life. We can humble ourselves before the Lord, or the Lord can humble us. And I know I've been on the latter end where God has humbled me so many times in my life. But if we humble ourselves before the Lord, that's when God is really going to use us. That's when God is going to do amazing things through us. And I think one of the biggest differences between children and adults is that children are able to bounce back from being humbled a lot quicker than adults. And I think that's one of the reasons why children grow so much and learn so fast, is because they learn from their mistakes. They learn from where they mess up. And the thing with adults is that, we have too much pride. And I think pride and humility can't really coexist. And we see this in the story in Matthew chapter 19, verses 16 through 22, about the rich young ruler. This rich young ruler asks Jesus, how can he enter the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus says, you have to go sell all your possessions. And we see the rich young ruler walk away sad because he had a lot and he had a lot of pride. But if he would have just humbled himself, he would have been able to enter the kingdom of heaven. He would have experienced God's goodness. And when we humble ourselves, that's when we really grow, and that's when God can speak to us. So the first question is this: share a time when you were humbled, and how did you grow from it? Welcome back. As Jarvis shared this morning, he read a verse, 3 John 1, verse 4, and it says this: I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. And for me, I don't have kids yet. Someday, I can't wait to have kids and hopefully see this lived out. But for me, I have spiritual kids in a sense. I'm a youth pastor here, and this verse is so true. When I see one of my students walking out their faith, or I see one of my students entering into the presence of the Lord, that gives me so much joy. And one thing Jarvis said this morning that I love is a parent's priority is to gradually transfer a child's dependency away from them until it rests solely on God. And I love this because a child growing up, they rely on their parent in almost every aspect of life. And as they grow older and older, they need their parents less and less. But hopefully at that point, they start relying on God more. And it's the same thing in our faith. If we have spiritual children, whether those are our own kids or people we're spiritual parents to, at the beginning, they're going to rely on us so much. But hopefully we can disciple and we can even live out our faith in such a way that they see that they can follow us and eventually be completely dependent on God and not us to experience growth in their life. And one thing I love about Watermark is we believe in the next generation. So we're gonna end with kind of a cool time here tonight. The first thing I want you to do as you end is answer this question: how can I be a better spiritual parent? And this can be to your kid, your actual kids or your spiritual kids. But how can I be a better spiritual parent? And then once you finish that, I want you to end this way. Pray for your kids by name. Pray for your spiritual kids by name. And just spend time praying for the next generation here at Watermark so we can see them carry the mantle further than we ever could.